So in lecture 5.2, right near the end, I talked a little bit about the sort of the interconnections between water and a host of human development issues that we are currently facing globally. And I want to dive into that a little bit deeper in lecture 5.3 and really look at why water matters, why we can help solve a lot of other problems by focusing on water and providing clean, safe water for everybody. So by the end of this lecture, you should be able to explain to somebody what the relationships are between water scarcity and hunger, poverty, education, and health. And remember, when we talk about water scarcity, we're not just talking about access to water, but we're talking about access to clean water, clean, safe water. So, what are the relationships between having enough water and having clean, safe water? And how does that connect to these large global problems we're trying to solve related to hunger, poverty, education, and health? And there are no new keywords this particular lecture, so just keep reminding yourself of the previous key terms that we've talked about. So the water crisis, just some basic facts to begin with that I think many people will find shocking. There are 783 million people in this world who do not have access to clean and safe water. 1 in every 9 people in the world do not have that equates to 1 in every 9 people not having access to safe and clean drinking water. So if you have a hard time sort of thinking, well, what does 783 million people mean? That means 1 out of every 9 people on this planet. 443 million school days are lost every year due to children having water-related diseases like diarrhea, cholera, and other diseases. 1 in every 3 people in the world don't have improved sanitation facilities, so they may have an outhouse but don't have a flush toilet. That's equivalent of 2.4 billion people on Earth. 84% of those people who don't have improved sanitation live in rural areas. So rural dwellers are more likely to have unsafe, dirty drinking water than urban people are. Rural people also principally live through subsistence agriculture, so they're highly dependent on water to meet basic needs and to grow the food they need. And finally, according to the World Health Organization, for every dollar that we invest in water and sanitation, we have a return on our investment between $3 and $34. So that's huge. It financially, if you can't make the argument to people that for humanitarian reasons we should be providing safe, clean water to people, we can make an economic argument that we are going to see this return on investment that is just tremendously large. So, as I said last lecture at the very end, when we provide access to clean water to people, we are improving people's education, we're lowering hunger, we're improving health, and we're decreasing poverty. So how is that possible? That's what I want to look at just a little bit more in today's class. Health and water. Now, the connection between hunger and water, and obviously all of these things are very interconnected. If you are hungry, you're more likely to get sick. If you're hungry and sick, you're less likely to be able to go to school. So all of these issues are intertwined. But we know that if we're going to relieve hunger on a global scale, we have to begin with access to clean water. That may seem like a really simple statement, but we often forget that if we don't have access to a reliable source of water, food becomes very hard to grow and even more difficult to preserve and to prepare. It takes a huge amount of water, to grow food. Just think about the fact that on a global scale, about 70% of our water is being used for agriculture and irrigation. that just shows you how much water it takes. Water is therefore very fundamental to relieving hunger in the developing world. As I said in another already said, 84% of people who don't have access to improved water live in rural areas where they live principally through subsistence agriculture. That means they are growing the food that they need to eat in order to survive. They grow their own food. They do not go to the market to buy their food. Sometimes areas that experience a lack of water suffer because of poor water management, but more often it's just relatively a simple economic issue that they can't afford water. In Africa, people in urban areas are twice as likely compared to people in rural areas to have clean, safe water. Another way that we see this sort of divide between urban and rural is in sanitation. Rural areas have oftentimes less access to sanitation facilities, so sewage, clean, safe sewage facilities. And in sub-Saharan Africa, the situation is very poor. Only a quarter of rural population and less than half of the urban population actually have access to safe, approved, clean sanitation. That means that less than 1 in every 3 people in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, have access to a proper toilet. So very small investments in clean, safe water can have a huge impact on both crop production and on the overall nutrition of a community. In fact, research shows that that when you install wells within a community, one of the first things that we see happening is that small gardens start to pop up around the community. And development workers often say that when you ask people what has been the result of clean water, many people will then take pictures of the crops and of the progress that they've been able to make in growing food because of the fact that they have access to clean, safe water. And that gets us to then this idea of poverty in water. Poverty is the result of so many different things. Political instability, ethnic conflicts, war, climate change, all sorts of man-made causes. But one of the greatest causes of poverty in Africa and other developing countries is the lack of access to clean drinking water. The lack of water is often an insurmountable obstacle to helping oneself. You can't grow food if you don't have clean drinking water. You can't build houses. You can't stay healthy. You can't stay in school. You can't maintain steady employment. So without clean water, the possibility of breaking out of the cycle of poverty is incredibly slim. And unfortunately for women and children especially, this is even more of a reality. It affects every minute of the day for women and children. Sometimes the only source of water for a village is miles away. And many of the women in the community and the older girls are forced to spend literally hours every day walking to water sources and transporting water back to their communities and homes. It's almost always the responsibility of women and older children, particularly girls, to do this. And we see pictures of this, of women carrying, huge jugs of water, weighing, well over 40 pounds on their heads and going back and forth. So you can imagine physically the toll that takes on your body, which relates back to health, but you can also imagine the amount of time that takes out of your day. In fact, the United Nations estimates that in sub-Saharan Africa alone, women and children lose 40 billion hours a year collecting water. That's basically a year's worth of labor. And that's incredibly valuable time that's lost just trying to get access to water. And even though they are walking miles to get water every day, oftentimes where they're walking to get water, the water still isn't safe or clean. So when your day is consumed by meeting basic needs and losing hours just walking to gather water, you lose time to do things like learn a trade, earn a living, get a job. Just think of all the things that you would not be able to do in your day if you had to take 3 hours every day just to get water. So when some type of a water solution is put into place in a village or a small community, we can then start to children can go back to school instead of spending their day collecting dirty water, or being sick from the dirty water. Moms can spend time taking care of their families. They can focus on expanding their farming. They could work on, running a small business or whatever it is. So bringing safe, clean drinking water to communities should be one of the highest priorities when we're looking at human development in these poor, impoverished countries. And then that gets us into the link between education and water. And we know that education is critical if we're going to break out of the cycle of poverty. Over half of our schools in the world don't have safe water and don't have sanitation facilities, don't have toilets. A lack of clean water has very serious effects on students' academic performance and attendance rates. The lack of safe water can cause even the best students to lose momentum. They're dealing with hunger pains, and they might be dealing with stomach pains from diarrhea and other diseases. Of course, we've already talked about the fact that they oftentimes have to miss school just to go fetch water or to care for sick parents or siblings. Oftentimes, if the teachers are sick because of water diseases, then school gets canceled completely. So you can see there's lots of reasons why we have lower education levels in areas where there isn't access to clean, safe water. For girls, the situation is particularly troublesome, particularly when they reach puberty. If schools do not have proper toilets and sanitation, once a girl reaches puberty, they often end up dropping out of school. Furthermore, as I've already said, it's typically a female's job to fetch water. And so they are spending their day getting water as opposed to going to school. Very little time for education when you are walking 4 miles a day just to get your water. So there's just a lot of burdens that come with a lack of clean water, and education just becomes less of a priority. And unfortunately puts people in this cycle of poverty and inequality. And without a proper education, there's very little chance of improving one's situation in life. And there's also huge challenges to other things like population growth, etc., when our females are not being educated. So what I would like you to do now is click in a minute on the film. There is a film called, it's a short film, 20 minutes. This is normal. Sort of looking at this issue of water and human development and how it all pans out. So go ahead and enjoy it. It's very well done, I think. And just absorb it and see what you learn. There will be a question on your final quiz for this module related to it. Not really related to statistics or anything like that, just more what did you learn from this particular film.